Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today we have a big show for you. We're going to start off the show talking about Nikola Jokic a little bit, talking about what he did last night, his record-setting historic night against the Washington Wizards, a couple things about him, and a few other things that happened in the NBA yesterday. Then we're going to dive into the off-season files. We're going to continue that. I know yesterday's show didn't go as great as it could have with the sound, but we will be redoing the national segment for everyone because we're trying to get all 30 teams out there. Then we're going to jump into some hockey. We haven't talked about hockey on this show yet, but there's a lot of developments in hockey. We'll talk about Austin Matthews a little bit, see what he's been up to on his little run. Maybe he's challenging for an MVP. And then our final segment, our fourth segment there was a new ruling came out just about 10 minutes ago for dealing with the NCAA and NIL, how that's going to affect teams. We will cover all that and more, but before we get too far into the show, remember that if you would like to become a bigger part of the show, all you need to do is go to streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network /tip. That's where you can leave a tip or donation. You can have your message scroll across the screen for everyone to see, including me. We'll have a little conversation about it again. If you would like to be a bigger part of the show, all you need to do is go to the link on the screen, streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network /tip. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. I mentioned it a little bit in the intro. We're starting off with Nikola Jokic and his historic night. He had a triple-double against the Washington Wizards en route to a 20-point blowout, 130-110. We talked a little bit about this. I was on the GSMC Basketball Podcast earlier today where we talked a little bit about that, so go check that out. But I want to talk a little more about Nikola Jokic. Jokic has now joined just two other players as the only players to have a triple-double against every team that they've faced. Important distinction because while Westbrook and LeBron have both had triple-doubles against every single team, Jokic has only ever played for the Nuggets, so he never had the opportunity to play against them and get a triple-double against them. So there's only three players in NBA history to have ever done something like that. Welcome to the club, Nikola Jokic. He also became the leader in triple-doubles, shooting 100% from the floor. For those who didn't see his stat line last night, he had 21 points, 19 rebounds, and 15 assists on 100% from the floor, 10 of 10. Perfect shooting. You really can't get much better than that on a basketball court. It's tough to imagine much better. You don't miss, perfect from the floor, and you got 20-15-15 for the first time in NBA history that happened. Now, I mentioned earlier he's done that 4 times where he's had a triple-double with 100% efficiency from the field, most in NBA history right there. And he's climbing the charts. He's already in top 5 in triple-doubles. And this is what we talked a little bit about when I was on the basketball podcast earlier today. Nikola Jokic is now 4th in the NBA. He's at 121 in career triple-doubles. Only Magic, Oscar Robertson, and Russell Westbrook are above him. Russell Westbrook is the number 1 player. He's at 198 to the 120 for Nikola Jokic. I expect he'll pass Russell Westbrook within 3 seasons. Maybe 2 if he really starts going on a tear. But it's gonna be tough for him to do. Go on that tear like that, pick up 80 triple doubles in 2 seasons. It's possible, but it's tough. So then it becomes the question. We talked a little bit about it on the basketball podcast. Uh, when does Nikola Jokic become the triple double guy? Right now it was Oscar Robertson for a very long time, and then Russell Westbrook won his MVP and basically had a triple double every single night for almost 2 years, which insane run from him. But he's kind of taken a step back in his career. He's a little older now, and he can't quite do as much as he did before for winning basketball on the teams that he is on now. But Nikola Jokic is still the center of attention. He's still got a lot more years left in the tank, and he will most likely get there. But yeah, it lends to the question: what do you think? Do you think he is Mr. Triple W? Do you think he is that guy? Do you think he is the main proponent, the face of NBA triple doubles? I guess, and I'm not quite ready to say that personally. I don't think he's quite there yet. Like I said, he's still fourth. He's not top three. He will probably, maybe, he might pass Magic. He's 17 triple doubles behind Magic in his career. He might pass him this season, and that would be huge if he were able to pass him, adding to his legacy. But I'm not quite ready to say it. But a historic night for Nikola Jokic last night, and it's so fun to watch that man play. He is a very special talent, very special basketball player, someone that you could put in any era and he would dominate. He just has he's so smooth on the basketball court. He's so smart with it, and he's so big he can do anything he wants. And it's crazy to think a guy like Nikola Jokic, who, let's be honest, doesn't care about basketball. He'd much rather be doing anything else, except he gets paid hundreds of millions of dollars to do this. So it's not that bad of an incentive right there. To be one of the greatest basketball players on the earth and not care is crazy. It's mind-boggling for me to picture how good Nikola Jokic could be if he cared. And I don't know how many times I think about that at least once a week. Whenever I see these numbers that he puts up, he puts up these 2019 15 games. He puts up 40, 15, and 10. He does this night in and night out, and we're talking about it because a whole bunch of milestones were accomplished. But if he had just done this, any other night, it wouldn't be as big of a deal as it is right now. If it just hadn't happened to be the Wizards, who for some reason were the last team on his list to get a triple double against, which is crazy to me that the Wizards were the last holdout on that list. Something about them, but he got it done. So just picturing what he can do, because we talk about him and how spectacular he is, but we're used to how spectacular he is, and he doesn't try. He is born with elite basketball abilities, and it's crazy. It's fun to watch him play. I'm so glad that we get to watch him play. Watching greatness is fun, and we don't know how much longer he'll be in there, because he's not like LeBron. He's not going to play until he's 40. He just doesn't care enough to do that. You have to have a different level of intensity, and clearly LeBron has that. You have to have a different level of passion for the game to play until you're 40 years old at the level that LeBron is doing it. And Jokic doesn't have that, so we don't know how much longer he'll be doing it for. He'll be doing it for at least a couple more years, but yeah, it's very scary to think about how good he can be if he tried. But yeah, coming up in the next segment, we will be talking a little bit about the Washington Nationals. We're going to do a off-season files redo. Part 2 of the off-season files talking about the Washington Nationals coming up next. Thank you everybody so much for tuning into this segment. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows are 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sitting through that break. We have, like I said, coming up in this next segment, we will be talking about Washington Nationals. We're going to continue our off-season files series, part 2 today. Yesterday, we're going to do a little redo from that. But if you're just tuning in, we just finished talking about Nikola Jokic and his career night last night. If you would like to be a bigger part of the show, remember all you need to do is go to streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network./tip. Again, that's streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network./tip. Let you be a bigger part of the show. Leave a donation or a tip with a message. It'll come across the bottom of the screen there. Everyone can see it. Be famous for a second. We'll have a little bit of a talk, conversation about it, and we appreciate anything that you can leave. But like I said, let's get right into MLB off-season files, part 2, the Washington Nationals. Last time we talked about the New York Yankees. We talked about them acquiring a bunch of talent. They went all in on this offseason. The Nationals are on the opposite end of that spectrum. Unlike the Yankees, their window to win a World Series is not open. It's firmly shut closed. They are trying to rebuild their way up there. They are still firmly in the midst of a rebuild. So unlike the Yankees, we aren't looking at these major moves like acquiring Juan Soto, but we're looking at some of these minor ones, talking about the farm system a little bit, seeing some of these smaller time moves that they made to try and be prepared not just for this season, but for seasons to come. And there were a couple moves made at the major league level, and we'll start off with that. The first thing that they did is they signed a third baseman in Nick Senzel from the Reds. Senzel is okay. I mean, he's nothing special, right? He's going to sit there, he's going to give you quality defense there at third base, and he's going to be a contact hitter. He's solid against lefties, not great, pretty okay against righties. He's a very average player, but is a nice piece to have on a young team like the Washington Nationals. Senzel isn't a super veteran presence, but having him out there to bolster the infield is pretty important for a spot where the Nationals were really, really weak at in third base. And then the other major signing that the Nationals had in this offseason is they went out and they got Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo is going to come in and provide much needed power to a lineup that was power deprived all of last season. You had a team that could not hit a home run to save their lives. They had C.J. Abrams and Lane Thomas at the top, but they really were lacking in power. So if you look at this, they went out and they got power, which was the biggest need of theirs. Sorry, I was pulling up the stats here. But yeah, the biggest need of theirs, adding power. Joey Gallo's going to do that. If he can hit for average, if he can hit for any kind of average, it's going to be a huge, huge gain for the Nationals. They got him relatively cheap, a 1-year deal. He's going to come out there and play in the outfield, shore up that spot for the Nats. My goodness. Thank you. Sorry. But adding him to the lineup, he's really going to improve that offense. So, yeah, looking at the numbers, we talked about their lack of power. The Washington Nationals were 29th in the league in home runs. Only the Cleveland Guardians had hit less. Not a good spot to be in if you want to be a good baseball team. Regardless of the fact, the Nats still won 71 games last season. They won 71 games, which is much better than most people thought they were. And they made some improvements in this offseason. I know there's not a lot of expectation for them, but bringing guys up from their farm system is what's really going to make this team go. You talk about guys like James Wood, outfield prospect, top 10 consensus in all of baseball. Dylan Cruz, also a top 10 consensus prospect in all of baseball. At least one of those guys, if not both of them, should be, or I hope will be on the roster for opening day. Obviously, we still need to make it through spring training, see how everything goes, see how they have adjusted to the MLB pitching. They were both in Double-A at the end of last season, and there were some struggles from James Wood with some whiffs, but it's not bad enough that if the Nationals think they can be good this season, which they probably aren't, to bring him up. Adding a guy like him and Dylan Cruz to that lineup, first of all, their defense is going to be a lot better. They are going to improve that lineup drastically, and it's going to bring butts to the seats, which is very important when we're talking about a rebuilding team. I know Washington is still a relatively big market, and their attendance numbers were fine last season, but it was nothing compared to when they were winning, obviously. So bringing these guys in, would be huge for them. What we're looking at for the outlook of the Washington Nationals, their pitching staff is really going to be the big question. You have two guys in Mackenzie Gore and Josiah Gray. Josiah Gray, who was the All-Star last season. You have two guys who have ace potential. And I say ace potential, they're not there yet. They have the ability to become it, especially Mackenzie Gore. If he can take that huge step forward, you look at a guy like him with plus fastball, and when he's on, he is on. There were games last season where he was unhittable, but there were more games last season where he was off. He just wasn't himself. He has some issues with control. His walk rate, I believe, is at 29% last season, which is way too high. He did have a really good strikeout rate. He was striking out almost 70% of the batters he faced. So there's positives and negatives to his game. But that fastball from Mackenzie Gore is something that's really terrifying if he can control it. He has the ability to be a true ace. Josiah Gray has been the ace of this rotation. And while he did make the All-Star game, he was the Nationals' lone representative. For those who don't know, every single MLB team sends at least one player to the All-Star game, and Josiah Gray was the Nationals' representative last season. Adding him in, having both of those guys at the front of the rotation, it's really boom or bust. Because while they're both really young, I believe they're both 24. Or right around their age, they're in the mid-20s. They both have not put it all together yet. Josiah Gray is a little bit closer, but Mackenzie Gore, he's coming off his first season, his first full season, I should say. He got injured 2 seasons ago. So seeing these guys improve is going to be huge. This is not a year that the Nationals expect to compete. This is not a year that I expect the Nationals to compete. But they did add Nick Senzel and Joey Gallo, and adding some of those prospects into the major leagues, it should be a better team than last year. So the amount of the wins should go up. Now, I'm not going to try and sound too optimistic here, and take this with a grain of salt, because I am a Nats fan, but what we're going to look at here for their ceiling. When I say ceiling, I mean everything clicks. Josiah Gray and Mackenzie Gore become two aces on the mound. That bullpen becomes what it could be. You have some names in there that if they stay healthy and if they continue to develop the way that they should, that could be, I'm not going to say an elite bullpen, but a top half of the league bullpen. And then that lineup, if Joey Gallo can hit for any kind of average, that lineup's going to be really, really good. And obviously, this is all assuming that Dylan Cruz and James Wood both hit as prospects in this year. Again, that's a lot of ifs. And I want to preface this with that's a lot of ifs. The Nationals, at their ceiling, if everything goes right, they, I believe, could compete for a wild card position this season, putting them way ahead of schedule of what they are expecting to be. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do it. More realistic expectations, win around the same amount of games, 70 games, maybe fourth in the division, although that division is really, really good. The Marlins have only gotten better. The Braves, obviously, we know what they are. The Phillies have made the World Series twice in a row, or almost made the World Series. They made the World Series 2 years ago and made the NLCS last year. And then the Mets, they went through a rough season last year, but they still have a very stacked roster. So the Nats, I expect to finish last in their division. But if everything goes right, I believe the Nationals could compete for that last wild card. I think a good comparison for them is the Reds of last season. They were expected to be one of the worst teams in the league. But once they got their prospects up, Ellie De La Cruz and everything like that, they became a really hot team for a second, and they started competing for that last wild card slot. Now, at the end of the season, they ended up missing the playoffs. So you look at a team like that, and that's the kind of expectation I have for the Nats if everything goes right. A more reasonable expectation for them is what they did last season. They're going to be a tough team, but not a good team. They're going to be the best of the worst, which is kind of where you expect them to be at this point in the rebuild. That pitching staff still has the corpse of Patrick Corbin being trotted out there. They've got a little bit of a bright spot in Jake Irvin, and then you've still got Trevor Williams, or maybe Trevor Williams. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do, because they do have some young pitchers that might come up. Rutledge and Cade Cavalli. Both of those guys could come up and start games. And again, that could really make the rotation really good. Patrick Corbin should not be a starting pitcher in the MLB, but he is. So, take everything I've said with a little bit of a grain of salt. I expect the Nationals to win about 75 games and finish last in their division. So, a slight improvement from last season, but not something that we're going to look back and say, wow, what an incredible season by the Washington Nationals. So, let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the Nationals are? How close do you think they are to competing again? Obviously, they had to sell everyone away after the 2019 World Series. They kind of fell off a cliff. They got rid of all their guys, and now they're back in this situation where they rebuilt really quickly. So, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. In our next segment, we are going to talk a little bit about some hockey. We're going to talk about Austin Matthews, his race for 70 goals. Could it happen? You'll have to stick around and find out, hear my thoughts. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sitting through that break. Like I said, we're going to be talking a little bit about hockey in this segment. First time since we've started this podcast that we're going to be covering some hockey, but there's been some major developments. Obviously, we are in the thick of playoff races, MVP races, everything like that in hockey, much like in basketball. But we're going to cover a guy in Austin Matthews in just a little bit. If you are just tuning in for the first time, in the first segment, we talked a little bit about Nikola Jokic, what he's done, his historic night, what we can expect for him in his career, and all that. And we just finished our second episode of the MLB offseason files, this time covering the Washington Nationals. So remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of this show than you already are, all you need to do is go to streamelements.com/GSMC Again, streamelements.com/GSMC to become a bigger part of the show. Leave a comment. Scroll across the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little conversation. Everyone can see it. Me, you, the entire audience. We really appreciate everything that you can leave for us. But anyway, let's get right into it. Like I said, Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews has been on a tear recently. In his, he hit 50 goals a couple nights ago, and that is the fastest that any American player has ever hit 50 goals. He did it in 54 games. 54 games. He's already at 52 goals. He is on a... He's already hit... He's at 76 points, tied for 6th in the league. Plus minus of 23. He has had a point in almost every single game leading up to this point. He's got a 1, 2, 3... He is on a 5-game point streak with 1 0-point game sandwiched in between. But then he's outside of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He is a point in 11 of his last 12 games. excuse me, 16 of his last 17. I apologize. He's on that 5-game point streak. He had back-to-back games with hat tricks. He has, in his last 5 games, 10 goals. Averaging 2 goals a game is insane. He, like I mentioned, is up to 52 goals. That leads the league. And he got to 50 goals faster than any other American in history. And now the real question is, can he get to 70? 70 goals has been an elusive number for a lot of people in NHL history. In fact, only 8 people in all of history of the NHL have ever gotten to 70. And the last person to get to 70 was 30 years ago. Brett Hull did it 3 years in a row, from 89 to 92. He had 70 goals in 3 straight years, and no one has done it since then. So it's been 30 years since someone hit this mark. And you've had arguably the greatest goal scorer in NHL history playing during this time in Alex Ovechkin. He's never hit 70. Austin Matthews is on pace to hit 70 goals. I think he's going to do it. He's got a little less than 30 games to score 20 goals, 18 goals. Like I said, that'd be the first time since Brett Hull did it in the 91-92 season. Austin Matthews is an interesting player, right? Because he is a pure goal scorer, kind of like Alex Ovechkin is. And it's funny to see patterns in hockey. You see you see guys like Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby. Obviously, those were the two faces of the league, of the last generation, I should say, of hockey players. And they're still playing. They're still doing their thing. But now you have Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid. And they kind of mirror Ovechkin and Crosby in eerie ways, right? We talk about one of the greatest pure goal scorers of all time, in Alex Ovechkin, and then coming up right behind him, his successor, Austin Matthews, a guy that in just 8 years is already in the top 150 goals scored all time, or almost. He's at 159. He will crack 150 before the season is over. He only needs 5 goals to get there. So he might do that by the end of this week. He's climbing these leaderboards incredibly quickly. He's only been in the NHL for 8 years. He's averaging a little less than 50 goals a season. He had a 60-goal season 2 years ago when he won the MVP. And the MVP race is another one of those that is interesting this year. It seemed like McDavid McDavid was the favorite heading in because of what he can do, how special he is. When we talk about how Matthews is kind of like an Ovechkin clone, Connor McDavid is kind of like a Sidney Crosby clone. And they got in the league around the same time. They have such similar skill sets. It's kind of eerily similar to years past. It's kind of cool how that works. But Connor McDavid was the favorite heading into the season to win MVP. And he's kind of having a down year by his standards. Not a down year by anyone else's standards, but a down year by his standards. So it seemed like Nathan MacKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche was going to run away with the award, and he was doing it for the first half of the season. And then all of a sudden, here comes Austin Matthews. 10 goals in 5 games, point in 16 of 17 games now. He leads the league in goals. He's 6th in points. He is on a rampage right now. He is nigh unstoppable with the puck in his hands. And he's made this an interesting race for MVP. Like I said, Nathan MacKinnon was running away with this reward. If you asked anybody who was going to win the Hart Trophy, the NHL's MVP award at the All-Star break, if they had been paying any attention, they would have told you that it was Nathan MacKinnon. He is having an incredible year, and we don't want to discount that. 34 goals, 59 assists, second in the league in points, fifth in the league in goals. He's kind of slowed down a little bit as of late. That's not to say he's been playing bad. He himself is on a bit of a point streak. He's had a 5-game point streak now. Much like McDavid, much like Matthews. They're both on 5-game point streaks. And he has these huge games in January, where he put up 4 points, 5 points, right in a row. He had a point in every single game in February. Every single one. Or in January, excuse me. Every single one in January. And he's kind of cooled off this month. He's put up a couple, no, I won't say stinkers, because he do other things other than scoring in the NHL. But Austin Matthews has taken this time, this little cool-off period from Nathan MacKinnon, and he has run away with it. He has taken all the momentum that MacKinnon had and is taking it for himself. So it really raises the question: who this is gonna turn into a really big MVP race down the stretch. And it's exciting. Austin Matthews won it a couple years ago. Nathan MacKinnon has not won one yet. And he deserves one. He, much like MacKinnon and McDavid, are certified Hall of Famers. He's just gotten unlucky that he has to play with McDavid and Matthews. These guys that are generational talents. And again, nothing against MacKinnon. He's one of the top players in all of hockey. But sometimes you just get unlucky, NFL players had to play against Tom Brady. Now they have to play against Patrick Mahomes. These guys are going to suck up awards. They're going to suck up titles. And it's tough to avoid. You get unlucky sometimes with your timing. But this is his best chance to win it, Nathan MacKinnon, to win the MVP. And I'm curious to know what you guys think. How close are you following this race? It's going to be a tight one down the stretch. I believe MacKinnon still is still the favorite to win the MVP. But if Matthews can hit 70 goals, again, first time in 30 years that anyone would have hit 70 goals, it's going to be tough not to give the award to him. It's going to be really, really tough to do that. And I'm kind of on the fence about it because I think MacKinnon absolutely deserves to win an MVP for how good he's been, not just this year, but in years past. He's a guy that won't get another chance as good as this, straight up, most likely. There's always the shot that he can go on another tear, but he's only getting older, and he has some tight competition to play against. He already got a cup, which is better than Matthews and McDavid can say. He's gotten beat there, but he doesn't have that MVP trophy that would really fill out his resume. And he deserves one. So right now, I think it's still his, but if Austin Matthews can continue on this stretch and MacKinnon can't quite bounce back, then it's going to be a little tougher for him to win it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. In our next segment, there was some breaking news coming out of the NCAA with regards to a lawsuit about NIL with Tennessee and Virginia. Some new rules came out. We're going to talk about the effect that NIL has in all of college sports, what this ruling is, and what I expect the future to hold with all of this. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in. We will be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sitting through that break. I appreciate your patience. If you are just tuning in, this is our fourth and final segment of the day. So sad. But you missed a good show. We talked in our first segment about Nikola Jokic and his historic night. Second segment, we did our second installment of MLB Offseason Files, this time about the Washington Nationals. Talked a little bit about them. And we just finished covering hockey. Debut hockey segment. We talked about Austin Matthews, his streak, Nathan McKinnon, and who should win the MVP. So go check those out. Those will be on YouTube. But remember, before we get into this segment, we'll be talking about NIL, the new ruling that just came out about 45 minutes ago now. And the ripple effects that it might have, not just in college sports, but in professional sports maybe as well. Remember that if you would like to be a bigger part of the show, can leave a tip or donation by going to streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network./tip. You can leave a message with that donation. It'll scroll across the bottom of the screen, and it'll be there for everyone to see. You, me, the entire world, your parents. Leave a message. All your friends will see it too. Again, that's streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network./tip. We appreciate anything you give. Like I said, we have a big final segment for you, and it's just 3 letters. NIL. NIL is the biggest story in college sports right now. It's the biggest story, it's the biggest change to the college game. It challenges the whole amateurism aspect of it, right? And that's really what the NCAA exists to have, amateur athletes. And the NIL, while I certainly agree that athletes should be paid or should be allowed to get paid to use their name, image, and likeness, I feel like that's just common sense. You know, if you want to if someone wants you to endorse their product, you should be allowed to endorse their product. You know, there's no rules against Wendy's picking me to be in their commercial? Why should there be rules for a D1 athlete or an NCAA athlete, from doing it? So very common sense, but there's also a world where it can go wrong, right? And this is a world where it's a part of recruiting, and it is always going to be a part of that. Don't get me wrong, I know that's the game. I know that NIL, recruiting, they kind of go hand in hand. They're kind of intertwined. It's tough to separate them without causing a break, right? So we want to look at this, and we want to be fair. This is obviously new. This is a new thing, come out just a couple years ago. And we want to set this so that it'll not only help college athletes, but not hurt them, because you can have it help these star of star athletes like NIL. People like Caleb Williams and Caitlin Clark are loving NIL. They are making boatloads of money off of these deals, and that's awesome for them. Go get your bag, go get your money. I am so happy for you. But what it's not doing is it's not helping college volleyball players. It's not helping swim and dive teams, There's so many other aspects that makes it so much more complicated than we should pay the college players. Because in a lot of ways they kind of do get paid. They get paid in scholarships. They're not having to pay for school. So there's ups and downs to all of this. But there was a ruling that came out earlier today. Tennessee and Virginia are suing the NCAA, basically saying, hey, you can't get us in trouble for this. And the courts came back today and they said, yep, that's right. You can use NIL money to help recruit. You're not allowed to stop them. Now, this is just an injunction. It's not a final ruling. It's just going to stop them from punishing teams like Tennessee who got slapped with this exact issue. It basically says that boosters can go and talk to prospects now and help recruit them, which is a double-edged sword. You want NIL to help benefit these athletes. You want them to get the money that they deserve for putting their bodies on the line, for performing, entertaining us, doing a sport that we all love. So much fun to watch, so much joy is brought by them playing these sports that they love. They deserve to be able to get paid. Now, when it comes to the question of do they deserve a salary, that's a little bit of a different question. Name and image likeness is not a program that pays every single athlete. It isn't. It's not supposed to be like that, and I don't think it should work like that. What name, image, likeness does is it allows these guys to go star in commercials. It allows them to sign autographs and sell it. It allows them to control the use of their own personal name, their own likeness, stuff that any other person in their right mind would be mad if they weren't able to control. So we're looking at, it's a very complicated issue, right? It's not something that's black and white. Oh, give them money, that's it. There's a lot of laws. This isn't just about sports. This is when you get into lawmaking and politics and lawyering and the judicial system and all that fancy stuff. All that fancy stuff that's way over my head. But this is the time, because this is the formation of it. This is when we're going to figure out the quirks, the issues, and we're going to iron it out. Now, it's never going to be perfect. Nothing in this world is perfect. There's always some kind of issue with it. But we can at least try and iron the bumps out so that they're few and far between. So when we are looking at NIL, obviously this ruling came out and it's basically allowing you to recruit using NIL, which is a slippery slope. Again, we get into a lot of slippery slopes here in our fourth segments, because there's a lot of ways it could go bad. You don't want to get to the point where college students are relying on super rich people to pay them. And I mean, you know what? Honestly, it doesn't matter that much. If rich people want to, if these boosters want to come in and spend on an athlete, let them do it. Let them pay those guys. They deserve their money. But if it's going to take away from, if it's going to hurt some of these smaller programs, which it is, recruiting, it always was like this. This time it's just out in the open. So it's a little better now that it's transparent. We're all about transparency here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We're big fans of transparency. So there's a lot of ways that this could go good. And I love NIL. I want that to be very clear. I know I'm talking a little bit of smack on it, but I'm a big fan of it. It's common sense, at least in theory. And that's the thing, in theory. There's a lot that could go wrong, but there's a lot that could go really right. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on NIL. I know it's a new issue, and I know it's hotly contested around every college sport. We talked a little bit about how it could affect the G League on the basketball podcast that I was on earlier today. And it really is an interesting question, because if these athletes are getting paid, what's the downside to going to school, right? And he's right. What is the downside to going to school? You get an education, you get paid, and you get put in that college culture that I would recommend to anyone. I mean, it's not something you have to do, but it's something that you miss out on if you just go straight into the workforce, straight into the G League, for instance. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the NIL, everything that's happening with it, and the ruling. I think that it's good. I think this ruling is good, straight up. I think getting rid of punishments just for paying someone, because the issue is they're going to try and make this even, and that's going to be impossible to do. So what you want to have happen here with NIL is you just want transparency, and you don't want any kind of shady business dealings to go around, because what people were doing is they were creating corporations, fake corporations, to pay these players, and the only reason these corporations existed was to be an NIL fund, was to pay these guys, and that's a little bit shady, and we want everything to be transparent. So anything that increases the level of transparency, everyone knows where this money is coming from, everyone knows how much they're getting. That's not as important, but they know that they're getting some, and that they're allowed to do what they want with their name and their image and their likeness is the most important thing. So that's where I stand on this issue. Like I said, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on all this. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning into today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. In the future, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show, you can go to streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network /tip, leave a message. We really appreciate it. My name is Jeremy Lapidus, your host of GSMC, so Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I will see you on Monday. Everybody, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.